the TGW Logistics webinar. Today we'll be discussing all things peak season. I'm sitting here with Jeff and Dex. Can you guys quickly introduce yourselves?
Hi, Megan. Sure. I'm Jeff Rhodes. I'm the Director of Sales for North America for TGW. I've spent basically my entire career in logistics and supply chain, the past 8 of which I've been here at TGW.
Nice.
And I'm Dex Weber. I'm on the business development team here at TGW. I focus primarily on our industrial and consumer goods segment. I have more than a decade of experience in the technology sector, including running some distribution operations.
Nice. We're excited to be here and, discuss all the things that we're doing for our clients during peak season.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Speaking of, we know peak season is like the Super Bowl for supply chains. For months and months, companies are preparing for and then executing order fulfillment for their peak days. From your experiences and conversations with our clients, what sorts of things are they doing like months out, even prior to Black Friday?
I love that analogy, Megan, the Super Bowl. I mean, and if you think about it, what that says is if you don't execute in that key moment, that nobody remembers how great your year was. That everything you did leading up to that doesn't matter if you fail at that key opportunity. Yeah. You also mentioned Black Friday, which I think is important. We service 3 sectors: retail, which obviously Black Friday talks about. We also service grocery and we service industrial and consumer. Mm-hmm. Peak season looks different for each one of those areas. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it's the key things. Do I add labor? Do I add manual processes? Do I understand or change my SLAs? Do I need additional space? Those are the kind of questions that we ask our customers, and in turn our design teams ask the customers when we're evaluating the solutions for our customers.
That's a really good point. You actually mentioned something that reminds me of preparation. So what is, does preparation look different for different industries? And what about peak season as a whole? How does it look different for different industries?
Well, sure. You think about peak as that traditional Black Friday, right? And it's Black Friday, Cyber Monday, those 2 to 3 weeks when you're at home doing your shopping or your family's doing their shopping online. But if you're a grocer, it looks a little bit different. It could be the Super Bowl. Yeah. It could be Mother's Day. It could be the holiday dinners. It could be those promos that happen over the 4th of July cookout. All those spikes when you think about when do I do my shopping, the retailers are planning in advance for that to bring the inventory in. Likewise, industrial, consumer, retail, you think about, okay, if I'm going to buy something, back to school could be a part of peak season. Right. Retailers generally have different peaks. And if you're an omni-channel, there's a digital peak, there's a retail peak, there's a wholesale peak, and they're all different. And you just have to account for those and the variability in it.
Yeah.
And I think some of the peaks can be different too. So if you think of like a DIY home improvement, the peak's not going to be as like maybe drastic of a change as something like in the fashion industry. It's going to be like springtime to summer, and it's going to be a little more steady of a peak. So the way you'd have to approach it and handle it might be a little bit different than some of the other industries.
Especially home improvement. That's a great point, Dex. I mean, if you think about if you've ever been to a Lowe's or a Home Depot on a warm Saturday in the spring, and that warm Saturday starts in Florida and moves all the way up to the Northeast. So it's a little bit different here in Michigan than it would be where I am in North Carolina versus Florida, right? Yeah. It's just a rolling peak season, but it's certainly different from traditional retailers.
Now, I want to kind of change the topic here. Typically, customers come to us initially because they're struggling to meet SLAs or they've maxed out their storage in their manual warehouse, and they just can't find the labor to support their operations. How are those pain points exacerbated by peak season?
That's a great question. And I think understanding the SLAs is key to the design. And that's some of the first questions we ask when we sit down and talk to a potential customer. What are your SLAs? Yeah. Why are they important? Do they change throughout the year? For example, do you extend your click to ship dates, during peak season? And some customers you'll see actually have extended shipping. We need to understand those going in. Why is it important? Why is it important to the customer experience? Right. And we incorporate all that into our design process because number one, the customer has to be satisfied, and the client has to have the customer experience that they want with the design.
Good to know. So what are some other challenges that our customers face with peak season?
Well, if you think about some of the things that we mentioned earlier that they do, SLAs get disrupted because.
Yeah.
So what's that root cause, right? And when you're looking at each one of those things, and we start looking at the root cause, and those are the symptoms that you make sure that you address during the design,
Right.
and then you take those challenges away from the customer, and then you're managing a smaller time period.
Yeah, and I think anything to do with your processes that you have in your warehouse during peak season is basically just amplified. So some of the challenges, for example, could be recruiting. Recruiting might be hard for your distribution center, but when you start thinking about more of a peak season, you need to bring in additional people. You might have a lot more competition in the area with other distribution centers or maybe different companies. So those are going to be a little bit more amplified, and those are challenges you're going to have to overcome. I think one of the other big ones is training. You know, when you think about training time, especially in a manual warehouse, there's a lot of manual touching points that you have when you're working on an order, depending on which process you're in. And so the training for that, you know, it might take some time and it will cost a lot. People are starting to recruit, you know, months in advance to get ready for peak season. So that's going to be, you know, a challenge that they have to work through. And then I think turnover is another big piece. So a lot of times you're bringing in some maybe short-term labor to help, you know, boost your peak season. But, you know, if you have an environment that's not maybe appealing to them, you might experience more turnover, and that's just more training, more cost that you have to manage.
I don't think you can say enough about training and turnover, especially during peak season. And I ran warehouses for years before I got onto the automation side. But typically going into peak season in some industries, you would double your workforce. And imagine if you've got 500 or more people, and some warehouses now have over 1,000 year round, and you bring in double your workforce. How do you possibly train 1,000 people for 3 weeks? And is the investment worth it? And, you know, today with automation, we can train people to be on rate. I mean, after the safety training and the generalization of onboarding is done, you can be picking at rate with our pick stations in less than 1 hour.
Yeah. Wow.
It's amazing. And it's the amazing investment, number one, in the automation, lowers the training time, gets them up to speed faster, and you need less people to do the same amount of work. So it's really a great ROI.
And I like what you're saying there too, because when you're also looking at your maybe year-round staff, you can put your best people maybe in a more manual environment to keep things, because they know the processes, they know the goods, they know how things are supposed to work. And that way you can leave the, you know, easier training pieces more towards your short-term labor to help you get what you need to do, and then cut down those training costs significantly.
Yeah. I'm sure our listeners and viewers will appreciate the fact that we're helping them cut those training costs and time so that people can get up to speed to support their peak season. Let's talk solutions. I imagine that it can be tempting to see the potential of a warehouse automation and want a solution that can handle really any sort of peak demand without compromise. How do you advise customers to think about the size and scope of automation that makes sense for their business?
Again, great question. And I know the first thing I like to do with a customer, if my team goes to a warehouse, we sit down and we talk about their business, but we walk the building and we see where the touch points are. And you can literally find a solution to every problem, but at the end of the day, it's prioritization and what makes sense. You know, what are the root causes? What's the best ROI? We typically look from a design process on a business case methodology. So it's what makes sense, because at the end of the day, it's an investment. An investment, you need to have an ROI for it. How fast are you going to pay that back? And we usually work from the top down and solve the problems and come up with the best solution for the customer.
Yeah, and I think it was you that said this one time to me, Jeff, where it's like when you're designing a system, you know, you can't always design to peak because it's only a short piece of the year. That would be like building a house to hold a bunch of, you know, your family for Thanksgiving, but it's only, you know, going to be for 1 or 2 days a year. So that's like kind of the approach you have to think of when you're also coming from a solution perspective. So it's kind of when we're helping calculate that business case and the ROI with our customers, we have to keep in mind that, you know, we have to think about peak season and we have to incorporate it into the processes. And it does have some impact on design, but you can't fully design to peak, or you're going to have an underutilized system for most of the year.
Yeah, one of my early customer meetings here at TGW, we went in for a design discussion, and, you know, the head of supply chain came in and goes, I just want to lay the ground rules early for you. And he at the time said, I don't want to build a church for Easter Sunday. And then he just turned and he walked out. And if you think about that, that makes sense. I mean, you can put up chairs in the church for those extra people that come in, and that's kind of what you do for those 2 to 3 weeks. But that stuck with me. That quote stuck with me over the years. And I try to think about that now when I'm sitting with a customer. I don't want to build a church for Easter Sunday.
Love that. Can you guys give me some examples of some solutions that we've implemented that are both efficient for daily operations and flexible and powerful enough to handle peak?
Sure. My team deals primarily in retail and apparel. And I'll give you 2 solutions here. One is Urban, who we talk about a lot on the internet because that's our biggest solution globally. That was my team's project back from 2020. It's a beautiful site. We encourage everybody, if you haven't been there and you're listening and you want to go to reach out to Dex or I, we'll definitely get you there because it's an impressive site. But even there, we do some manual stuff during peak season. And we come in and we put up, think about your pinch points. For them, it's picking and packing because their orders double over a 3-week period. So we do some manual pack stations. We do some manual picking offline. That takes volume off the sorter, and it allows us to get units. So we did 100,000 units on peak day there last year offline. But it's really for a less week period, and it was very, very efficient. Another example is our Ralph Lauren solution that we're going live with right now. That's a flash pick solution. They're moving from a batch pick environment to a discrete pick. But during peak season that first year, we're going to utilize some of their existing stuff with batch picking, and we'll get through those 2 weeks, and then we'll maximize the automation that we're putting in there going forward. Every customer is different, but it's how do you leverage the assets that they have and to solve the problems that they need solving for those. But those are 2 good examples for retail.
Yeah, thank you. And did you want to?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, with automation, when we're doing the design, you often use automation to feed into those manual processes and then also take it, after the manual processes to feed back into automation. And that's the way you can really blend that manual and technology piece together to really build that peak performance while also making it an affordable, realistic cost for your solution.
You know what? That's a perfect transition that I'm sure our prospective clients watching would love to know. What are some of the other biggest benefits and impacts of warehouse automation for peak season?
Yeah, I think, we talked about this a little bit earlier. So training is probably the number one piece. Like it allows you to be more effective with your training. You can be a lot quicker to get people up and running. And that saves a ton of cost for a lot of our customers. I think with technology, you can also look at right now it's big and popular to do digital twinning. And with digital twinning, you can kind of simulate what peak season would look like. So as you're designing and thinking about your warehouse and how to plan things effectively and make it work, you can really utilize the technology and understand, how those manual processes are going to blend in with those automated pieces. I think some of the other benefits would be consistent performance. You have higher throughput, you have better storage density, you have better inventory accuracy with automation. So all of these, come into play during peak season. And I think the other aspects would just be that reduced turnover piece. So when you're thinking about an environment and let's say you're looking to work at, one of the warehouses during peak season, you're going to want to find a place that you enjoy working at, something that's maybe ergonomic so you're not hurting your back. Because those manual environments, especially with heavy lifting, you may have a lot more turnover, and that's going to lead to a lot of cost. And I think that's one other huge piece that really feeds into the benefits of automation during peak season.
Yeah, I agree with all those. And surprisingly, I heard from a customer, and it was Urban Outfitters, and this came from their site leader there, Debbie Parkhill, who I really respect as a leader and as a person.
She's amazing.
But we were talking about this topic, and she had a great response. She said, the higher level of automation that we've put in this site, the higher level of applicant I'm seeing coming in the door. So think about that for a minute. And she explained it further. She said, the workforce today is much more technologically advanced than any workforce previously. Yeah. And they want to get excited about technology. And they come here and they see robotics. They see goods to person stations. They see shuttles, and they see just this huge automated site, and they get excited about it. So I'm getting a higher quality applicant. Even on the maintenance side, it's not just a forklift mechanic. Now it's an automation technician that's diagnosing problems with the laptop, and they've partnered with the local community colleges there. So just their workforce in general is better educated, their turnover is lower, their safety rates are higher, their throughput's gone way up. So I think there's tangible benefits and then there's unexpected. But when I heard that about the workforce, I was surprised. I was surprised I hadn't thought of it before because it was a great answer.
Yeah, I love what we're doing over there at Urban, and I love the partnership that we have with them, and I'm excited to continue to see how we'll help them evolve with their automation needs, especially for their peak season. So to close out our conversation, I'd love to hear from both of you maybe 1 to 2 key takeaways that you would like our prospective clients and the people watching when it comes to thinking about peak season and the role warehouse automation can play in solving the challenges of peak.
Yeah, you want to go first, Jeff?
Sure.
Yeah.
I would say the key thing to me is pick the right partner.
Yeah.
And that's key. And I say the right partner where you challenge each other, you have a respectful relationship, and you feel like you both ask the right questions to get to the best solution.
Yeah.
The second thing is have that plan to handle that additional volume during peak season, because you don't want to build a church for Easter Sunday. And then the last takeaway is just remember, nobody remembers who loses the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, I think for me, one big takeaway is just every different type of company is unique. And even if they're in the same industry, everyone has their own unique processes and goals. So peak is going to look different for every company.
Yeah.
And you can use some experience from similar companies, especially if you're looking at automation and working with a systems integrator that can really help identify based on previous experience, what might work well for you based on what others are doing. But everything kind of has to be a little bit tailored towards your business, your goals, your processes. And that's what, tying back to what Jeff said, that's what choosing the right partner is all about.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing your insights today, Jeff and Dex, on the peak support insights on how we support our customers today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
We appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you to the viewers and especially our prospective clients that are looking for peak support, especially with warehouse automation. TGW is here.